Hi everyone, welcome back to Coffee Books and Rain. I'm Rachel. With me is a little bit of coffee that's left over. I am working on it. It has gone a bit cold, but I'm still going to drink it. As I give you guys this final book review for today. I still am going to have to record more, probably tomorrow, but I've also got to take my boys out here in just a few minutes and make sure they get some dinner. Argos is on an antibiotic for a little bit of an infection, and Leo also had to go to the vet to get some ear drops because he has been bothering them so much they turned bright red and got inflamed. And hopefully, these drops are going to help him find a sense of relief. But otherwise, they're doing phenomenally, and they are both staring at me because it is getting close to their dinner time. But we have books, we have reviews, we have coffee, and we did have rain earlier. And then just as soon as I get off work, all the rain moves on, and I just have to deal with the fact that there was rain today, but there's not right now. But let's talk about the book of the moment, and it is The Scary Book of Fairy Tales, The Haunting Endings to 50 of Your Favorite Stories by Tim Rayborn. Now, my rating for this book is going to be probably a bit controversial. Why is that? Because if you've ever picked up a Brothers Grimm's book or any classic fairy tales that do not have Disney endings, then you have heard these stories before. And that is going to be my biggest critique. I picked this book up with the anticipation and hope of having a bit of, I guess, new horror infused with some classic fairy tales. I had the hope that I was going to get something I didn't already know. However, if you have ever picked up classic fairy tales, and I'm not talking the ones with happy endings, I'm talking about the original stories that were more about learning lessons, then you've heard these stories before. And that's going to be my biggest critique for this. Is it's very hard for me to want to give this book 4 stars because I don't like, other than being a short story anthology of familiar old fairy tales like Cinderella, Rapunzel, Snow White, and so many more, then, like, other than being all in one book now, then you're not getting anything new. But let me read you the summary. Once upon a time, in a land not so far away, will you dare to unearth the horrors lurking beneath these once innocent stories? They were never innocent. And maybe this is for a newer generation who maybe doesn't have that knowledge about fairy tales. I'm not sure. This spine-chilling anthology weaves together real fairy tales from cultures across the globe, unmasking the eerie and unsettling narratives that have been whispered through generations. From the chilling depths of Brothers Grimm, Germany, to haunting folklore of Japan, these stories were never meant for the faint of heart. Discover the true terror of Little Red Cap, where the woodsman may arrive too late to save the day, or Bluebeard, a tale of a matrimonial horror and secrets lurking in locked chambers. Encounter the chilling Baba Yaga, a witch from Slavic folklore who feasts on those who dare to trespass, and the sinister Teki Teki from Japan, a vengeful spirit seeking her missing leg. Perfect for lovers of history, culture, and the macabre, the Scary Book of Fairy Tales captivates with its blend of horror and enchantment. These authentic tales promise to thrill and haunt, inviting you to explore the shadowy corners of global folklore. Are you ready to uncover the terrifying truths behind these timeless stories? So it is only about 160 pages in paperback, and it is expected to be released September 2nd of 2025. So I'm going to be about a day or two late in getting my review out there. Now, Tim Rayborn himself, he's a historian, and I want to say it says he's writes on a variety of topics in history. So I understand creating an anthology of fairy tales from across the globe. But I mean, he did kind of almost the same thing as what the Brothers Grimms did. He maybe just went wider spread. But another thing he also did was take those Brother Grimm stories and even make them shorter, to the point that one of them could be retold in just a few paragraphs, and then you move on to the next story. Um, so there was not too much of a new take on them. There was not too much of a new interpretation on them. It's pretty much like boom, boom, boom. It's not even the story itself. It's more or less a synopsis of the story that Disney didn't tell you. So if the only exposure you've had to these stories, or some of these stories, was Disney, then sure, these could be surprising. Kind of like Cinderella's story. Not surprising that, her dad she loses her mom, her dad remarries, and then there's the stepmom, and then even in his story, he doesn't say what happens to the dad, even though I think he passes. But now it's her with her stepmom and her two stepsisters, who in this particular, his retelling, or what have you, Tim Rayborn's retelling, he says they're not ugly. The stepsisters weren't ugly on the outside, they were just ugly on the inside. Well, of course, Disney has made them not super attractive on the outside and also ugly on the inside. Well, then I don't know if you've heard about, so then there's the ball, and Cinderella wants to go, but her stepmother, she's like, okay, well, you can go if you get all the lentils, and she throws a whole bunch of lentils into the fireplace. And she's like, okay, now you have to get them all out and you can go. Well, this guy says that her stepmother does that twice and still doesn't let her go. And anyway, at the end of the story, we learn that one stepsister cuts off one of her toes to try to fit the slipper, and then one of the stepsisters cuts off part of her heel to try to fit the slipper, and he only notices that must not be her because they're bleeding. And I was just like, oh dear. Oh, and then I think birds eat out their eyeballs or something like that, potentially. And then Cinderella gets to go live happily ever after. So that's his story. And it's really very short. I think I just told you the whole thing in probably as many words as he did. Mine was just a little bit more back and forth a little bit. But I don't feel like he gave us anything new. And my favorite thing is really when someone is able to take a fairy tale and make it feel new in some way, in their own retelling, reimagining, whatever the case may be. T. Kingfisher is fantastic at it, giving us a story that feels familiar but with almost wholly new elements. A Sorceress Comes to Call is one that just comes to mind, and I think that one's about the Goose Girl. So just kind of putting that out there. If you're looking for kind of dark fairy tales, there certainly are people who do a fantastic job. I don't frequently talk about books that hit kind of incorrectly with me. And I do see where there could potentially be an audience for this book. But I honestly, if someone were going to pick this up, I would ask them to put it down and go pick up a Brothers Grimm. Because you're going to get not only more story, more fairy tale, even with the same level of kind of horrific endings. But if you're looking for the horrific endings, pick up the Brothers Grimm's, where you get the whole story instead of just a summary and then they move on to the next one. That is going to be my biggest critique on this, because he almost acts like the audience just does not know that fairy tales originally didn't have happy endings. That the happy endings came from movie producers and directors who wanted to provide the audience with a bit of, I guess, hope for a happy ending, that everybody lives happily ever after. I mean, everybody in general wants to live happily ever after, I would assume, in some way, and however they define that. But this book didn't bring me anything new. So, honestly, it didn't even bring me a meal. It didn't even bring me the whole Cinderella. It just brought me a piece of it. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but I've had that before. I kind of wanted something new. So that's my biggest kind of critique on this. And like I said, I never really come on here and criticize books, in my opinion, and I hope in an unfair way. I try to come in here when I do these books to provide my honest feedback for these books. And I felt like this one, like, there are frequently books that I run across that I know I am not the audience for, and I frequently won't review those on this channel. And because why would I talk about a book that I didn't like because I was not the right audience for it? That doesn't feel fair to the author. It feels like someone who's read it, who it maybe falls more for their genre of reading, they can provide the critique or feedback because it's what they like to read. This should have been what I loved to read. Fairy tales, especially kind of the darker ones. But I've heard all of these before. Now, okay, few here and there. Were there a couple of ones that I maybe wasn't familiar with, or maybe had only heard like whispers of, or I'll be honest, some of the other ones from around the world maybe hadn't had as much exposure to those. So for those, I felt like I wanted more. I wanted to hear more about those stories, the ones that I was less familiar with. So maybe we could have taken Hansel and Gretel out and, put that over here to this side, and then focus more on the ones from Japanese or Slavic lore that maybe people are less familiar with, because I say we, and I shouldn't say we, but I've heard of Baba Yaga. I've read a lot of different books that have her as a kind of character in the book, but I would love to have like a whole Baba Yaga. Like, what is the actual fairy tale for Baba Yaga? Is it just the snippets that I've heard through other books and retellings? Or is there more to it? Like, I'd love to know, especially with the Teki Teki that is in the Japanese one. That one was very interesting. I had not heard of that one before, so would have liked to know more. There were also a few in here that I just didn't really understand. And I didn't know where it came from or anything. And I wish I could remember what it was, because I was so like, okay, what? Wait, what? It might have been called the Juniper Tree. I'm not 100% certain, but it's like there was this kid and like the stepmother killed him? I don't know. Anyway, it was wild. I had never heard of it before, and it left me with like so many unanswered questions. Just so many, because I was like, there's got to be more to it than that. And now I might need to find that one, but what he gave me was just not enough. So that is going to be my critique. I would say that they're touting all this horror and scary, and I would definitely not. It's not horrific. It's not scary. It's just fairy tales with their original endings. It's not meant for kids. It's absolutely not meant for kids. But most fairy tales were not meant for kids to begin with. Anyway. I do think if I don't know. I'm trying to think. I didn't have the audiobook, I don't think. That could have been cool, because I just see somebody else, the audiobook, they said the audiobook was enchanting. The narrator's accent when pronouncing names was spot on. At normal speed, it works perfectly for younger or older listeners. Each story is only about 2 to 6 minutes. See, so they're really short, and I know some of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales were not that short to be able to be told in 2 to 6 minutes, but sounded potentially good. Just left me a little bit like wanting for something new and innovative because this was not it. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave it here because hope that you guys feel like I have provided not only honest feedback, but appropriate feedback that doesn't feel like I'm dogging on this book. I just wish there had been something new to discover, and I would have loved maybe for a new interpretation because, like I said, other than this just being an anthology of a collection of books we've already kind of read, it doesn't feel new. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I want to thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. If you have not liked and subscribed already, I certainly hope you will. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys on the next page. Have a great one. Bye.